Admiral Kate Morrison rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the endless stream of patrol reports flowing across her command screen. The Earth Defense Station hummed quietly around her, a massive orbital fortress that had been a home for the past 3 years. Outside the reinforced windows, Earth's blue marble hung in the darkness, peaceful and beautiful. It had been months since anything more exciting than a smuggler's ship had crossed their senses. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but Kate barely noticed. At 4-2, she had spent half her life in space, working her way up from a fighter pilot to commanding Earth's primary defense platform. Her red hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes showed the weariness of someone who had seen too many quiet nights turn deadly without warning. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Jack Reynolds from a communication station. "We're getting a priority transmission. It's strange. The signal's coming from way out in the outer rim sectors." Kate straightened in her chair. Transmissions from the outer rim were rare. Most civilized species avoided that dangerous region where pirates and worse things lurk in the dark between stars. "Put it through, Lieutenant." The main holographic display flickered and came alive with static. Slowly, an image formed that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. A creature unlike anything they had seen before appeared before them. Its skin was a brilliant blue that seemed to shimmer like water, and its large eyes were filled with a terror so pure it made Kate's heart clench. The alien was clearly injured. Purple blood trickled down its face, and its delicate fingers shook as it operated some kind of communication device. Behind it, Kate could see the ruins of what must have once been a beautiful building. Crystal structures lay shattered, and smoke drifted through holes in the walls. "Please," the creature whispered, its voice barely audible through the universal translator. The device struggled to convert the alien language into English, giving the words a strange, echoing quality. "Anyone who receives this message, I beg you. I am Elder Veth of the Kethere colony on Sanctuary Prime. We have lived in peace for generations. We hurt no one. We have no weapons, no armies." The alien's voice broke, and Kate found herself leaning forward in her chair. Something about this creature's desperation cut straight through her professional detachment. "The Vorthak have come," Elderveth continued, glancing fearfully over his shoulder. "They came in black ships that blotted out our sun. They burn our cities, cage our people like animals. They take our children." The alien's voice cracked completely. "They take our children, and we cannot stop them. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight." The transmission suddenly switched to recorded footage, and Kate felt her jaw clench so hard her teeth ached. The images were burned into her memory instantly. Massive reptilian creatures, easily 8 feet tall, herded groups of the gentle blue aliens into metal cages. These Vorthak wore dark armor that made them look like living nightmares. Their eyes glowed red, and their claws were as long as kitchen knives. Kate watched in horror as a Vorthak soldier grabbed a small Kethere child, no bigger than a human toddler, and tossed it carelessly into a transport vehicle. The child's parent reached through the cage bars, crying out in anguish, but there was nothing they could do. The beautiful crystal cities of the Kethere had built were being systematically destroyed. Ancient spires that must have taken centuries to grow were shattered with explosive charges. Gardens filled with alien flowers were trampled under heavy boots. It was destruction for the sake of destruction, cruelty without purpose. "If there's any mercy left in this galaxy," Elder Vetha's voice returned as the footage ended, "please help us. We offer what little we have. Our medical knowledge, our art, our friendship. We ask only for the chance to live, to raise our children in peace." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge of the Earth Defense Station in stunned silence. Kate stared at the empty hologram display, her mind racing. She had seen war before, had fought in the brutal conflict that marked humanity's expansion into space. But this was different. This was genocide. "Admiral," Commander Tom Bradley stepped up beside her chair. He was a steady man in his 30s, someone Kate had come to rely on completely during their years serving together. "We're receiving the Galactic Council's response to the transmission." The Council's message was everything Kate expected, and nothing she wanted to hear. A collection of alien diplomats expressed their deep sympathy for the Kethere's plight, spoke of the tragedy unfolding on Sanctuary Prime, and then proceeded to explain why absolutely nothing could be done about it. The distance was too great, the Vorthak too dangerous, the risks too high for civilized species to take. Kate listened to their excuses with growing anger. She had dealt with the Galactic Council before. They were bureaucrats who preferred meeting to action, committees to combat. They would debate this crisis for months while the Kethera died. "Tom," she said quietly, her voice carrying the cold edge that her cool knew meant business. "How long would it take our fastest ships to reach Sanctuary Prime?" Commander Bradley consulted his tablet quickly. 3 weeks at maximum burn, Admiral. But the Council specifically mentioned that the Vorthak are apex predators from a Class 9 Deathworld. Their military technology is supposedly centuries ahead of most galactic civilizations. Kate stood up slowly, her green eyes blazing with determination. Around the bridge, her crew watched her carefully. They knew that look. They had seen it before when Kate Morrison decided that something needed to be done, regardless of the consequences. "The Council can sit on their hands and debate while children are being slaughtered," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the bridge. "But that's not how humans do things." She turned to face her communications officer. "Lieutenant Reynolds, send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we need every available ship. We're going to war." Within 6 hours of Admiral Morrison's order, something unprecedented was happening across Earth's solar system. Every military base, every orbital platform, every hidden weapon depot was buzzing with activity that hadn't been seen since the colonial wars. The largest human fleet in history was assembling, and the speed of it shocked even veteran military commanders. Captain Mike Richards stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the Iron Wolf *, watching through the massive viewport as ships continued to arrive from all corners of human space. Battleships that normally patrolled separate sectors were forming up in perfect formation. Cruisers fresh from the shipyard still smelling of welding sparks took their positions. Carrier vessels loaded with enough fighters to darken a planet's sky moved into attack formations. "So, we've got the Thunderstrike coming in on approach Vector 7, reported Lieutenant Kelly Nash from the tactical station. Her fingers danced across holographic controls as she coordinated the growing armada. Captain Johnson signals ready for deployment. Mike nodded, but his attention was focused on the cargo operations happening all around them. Massive industrial haulers, ships normally used for mining operations in the asteroid belt, had been converted into ammunition carriers overnight. He watched in amazement as robotic loading arms transferred enough firepower to flatten entire continents into the fleet's weapon bays. The ammunition wasn't the refined energy weapons that most galactic civilizations preferred. These were human weapons, kinetic rounds the size of telephone poles, explosive warheads that could crack through a mountain, and close combat gear that would give alien diplomats nightmares. Earth's military had learned long ago that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Captain Richards, his communications officer, called out, "Priority transmission from the Galactic Council." Mike turned to see a holographic figure materialize on his bridge. The alien was tall and thin, with purple skin and multiple eyes that blinked in sequence. Its voice carried a condescending tone that Mike had come to associate with council bureaucrats. "Honored humans," the alien diplomat began, folding its forearms in what was supposed to be a gesture of respect. "While we appreciate your enthusiasm in responding to the Kethera crisis, we must strongly advise caution. Our intelligence reports indicate that the Vorthak are apex predators from a Class 9 Deathworld. Their combat capabilities exceed most galactic standards by significant margins. Perhaps you should reconsider this course of action." The alien paused, its multiple eyes focusing on Mike with what looked like pity. "We understand that humans are a developing species, and your intentions are admirable. However, the Vorthak have conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. They have never been defeated in open combat." Mike looked around his bridge at his crew. Lieutenant Nash was barely containing her anger at the alien's patronizing tone. His weapons officer, Ensign Bobby Clark, was making rude gestures at the hologram. Even his normally calm navigation officer looked insulted. "Thank you for your concern," Mike said politely, then reached over and cut the transmission mid-sentence. The bridge crew burst into laughter. "Sir," Kelly Nash said with a grin, "should I send them a reply?" "Absolutely," Mike replied. "Tell them we're from Earth. We invented apex predators." Similar scenes were playing out across the human fleet. On the heavy cruiser *Defiant*, Captain Linda Foster was reviewing tactical data when she received the same warning from a different council representative. Her response was even shorter. "We'll take our chances." Deep in the fleet center, the troop carriers were seen to control chaos. Colonel Dave Harper walked through the cramped quarters of the Marine Transport Storm Rider *, checking on his soldiers as they prepared for combat. These weren't regular infantry. They were Earth's elite rapid response force, men and women who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions the military had to offer. The colonel stopped beside Private Ryan Mitchell, a young man who was carefully cleaning a weapon that would have been banned on most civilized worlds. The rifle fired solid metal slugs at hypersonic speeds, designed to punch through the heaviest armor. Most aliens considered such weapons primitive and barbaric. "First time in a real fight," Mitchell Harper asked. "No, sir," the private replied. "But first time fighting for people I've never met." Harper nodded approvingly. Around them, dozens of other Marines were going through similar preparations. Some were checking their armor, heavy suit designed to keep fighting even after taking damage that would kill most alien soldiers. Others were loading ammunition for weapons that had been developed in Earth's harshest conflicts. "Listen up," Harper called out, his voice carrying through the transport. The conversation stopped as every Marine turned to face their colonel. "In a few hours, we're going to jump into a situation that the rest of the galaxy says is hopeless. The Vorthek think they are the toughest predators in space. They've been conquering planets while most species hide behind their diplomats." He paused, looking at each face. These were humans who had grown up in a world where everything wanted to kill them, where their ancestors had climbed to the top of the food chain through determination and pure stubborn refusal to give up. But they made one mistake, Harper continued. They hurt children. They enslaved families. They picked on people who couldn't fight back. His voice grew harder. That makes this personal. And when humans take things personally, we don't just win. We make sure the enemy remembers never to mess with us again. Far away in Vorthek space, War Prime Krex was receiving his own intelligence reports. The massive reptilian commander stood in his command center, studying holographic displays showing the approaching human fleet. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Mammals, Krex hissed, his red eyes glowing with amusement. Soft creatures from a water world. Look at their ships, crude metal constructions compared to our biotech vessels. Their weapons are primitive kinetic launchers. One of his subordinates, a scarred veteran named Thrak, stepped forward. "War Prime, the intelligence report suggests these humans have never lost a major conflict in their short history." Krex's laughter was like grinding stone. "Because they have never faced a Vorthak. This will be educational. For them." He turned to address his fleet commanders through the communication system. "Prepare for battle. We will crush these mammals quickly, then finish our harvesting of the Kethare. The humans will make excellent slaves once we break their spirit." But War Prime Krex had made the same mistake as the Galactic Council. He was judging humanity by the standards of other species. He had no idea what was coming for him. The familiar blue-white flash of hyperspace exit lit up the bridge of Admiral Kate Morrison's flagship as a massive human fleet dropped back into normal space. For a moment, everyone expected to see the beautiful crystal cities that Eldaveth had described in his desperate transmission. What they found instead was a vision that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Lieutenant Jack Reynolds from his communications post, his face pale as he stared at the main display. Sanctuary Prime hung before them like a wounded animal. The planet's surface, which had been covered in the shimmering crystal spires of Kethare civilization, was now a patchwork of smoking ruins and industrial scars. Where once beautiful cities had reached toward the sky like frozen music, now only broken stumps remained. Massive strip mining operations had torn open the planet's crust, leaving bleeding wounds that glowed red in the darkness. Captain Lucy Chen's reconnaissance frigate Defiant Asterisk had pushed ahead of the main fleet, her advanced sensors sweeping the devastated world. Her voice came over the fleet communications with barely controlled fury. "Admiral, I'm getting detailed scans of the surface. This is worse than we thought." Lucy paused, and Kate could hear her taking a shaky breath. "We're picking up approximately 50,000 Kethare life signs in forced labor camps. They are scattered across 12 different sites, all of them building what looks like Vorthak weapon platforms and ship construction facilities." Kate felt her hands clench into fists as more reports flooded in. The orbital defense platforms that should have protected Sanctuary Prime were now twisted metal monuments to Vorthak brutality. Debris fields marked where Kitharay civilian ships had tried to flee and been hunted down like animals. Captain Rodriguez, Kate called the commander of the heavy cruiser Asterisk Vengeance Star. What's your sense of reading on enemy fleet strength? Admiral, we've got problems, came the grim response. The Vorthak fleet is approximately 30% larger than our force. Their ships are using some kind of bioorganic technology I've never seen before. The hulls seem to be alive, actually healing damage as we watch. The tactical display updated with red markers showing the enemy positions. The Vorthak fleet was massive, dark, predatory vessels that looked more grown than built. They hung in space around Sanctuary Prime like a pack of sharks, their hulls pulsing with sickly light. Each ship bristled with weapons that seemed to writhe and move on their own. By every military calculation Kate had ever loaned, the smart move was to withdraw. The human fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing technology they didn't understand. Any reasonable commander would pull back, call for reinforcements, and develop a proper strategy. Then the communications array picked up a transmission from the planet's surface. It started as static, then resolved into the sound of Ketare voices speaking their musical language. The universal translator worked frantically to convert the words, but it was the emotion behind them that needed no translation. Fear, pain, desperation. Mama, please don't let them take me, came a small voice, crystal clear through the speakers. The translator identified it as a juvenile Kai, no older than a human child of 5 or 6 years old. Every person on the bridge froze. The sound of a terrified child cut through all barriers of species and language, striking directly at the most basic human instincts. Kate felt something primal and violent awakening in her chest, something that their distant ancestors had carried when they fought saber-toothed tigers with nothing but sharpened sticks. The transmission continued, showing a scene being broadcast from the planet's surface. A small Ketare child, its blue skin dull with exhaustion and fear, was being dragged away from its parent by a massive Vorthak soldier. The parent, clearly weakened by forced labor, tried desperately to reach for its child but was held back by energy restraints. Processing Facility 7 requires additional juvenile specimen for adaptation trials, the Vorthak soldier reported in a voice like grinding metal. The child's terrified cries echoed through space as it was loaded onto a transport vehicle with dozens of others. The silence on Kate's bridge was deafening. She looked around at her crew and saw her own rage reflected in their faces. These weren't just military personnel anymore. They were humans witnessing the worst kind of evil, and every instinct in their DNA was screaming for action. Admiral, Commander Tom Bradley said quietly, the Galactic Council protocols recommend we request a formal negotiation before engaging in hostile action. Kate's laugh was cold as winter steel. Tom, patch me through to all ships in the fleet. It's time to make our intentions clear. The communications channel opened, carrying her voice to every human ship in the system. All vessels, this is Admiral Morrison. What we're seeing here today is genocide. The systematic destruction of an entire peaceful civilization for the crime of being unable to defend themselves. She paused, looking at the tactical display where the Vorthak fleet was beginning to move into attack formation. I know what the textbooks say about the odds we're facing. I know what the Council would advise. But I also know what it means to be human. We stand between monsters and children. We always have. Her voice grew harder, carrying the weight of humanity's long history of standing up to bullies. All ships, battle stations. No quarter asked, none given. The response was immediate. Across the fleet, human warships powered up their weapons and began moving into attack formation. The distinctive whine of charging energy weapons filled every bridge, accompanied by the mechanical sounds of missile tubes loading. A new voice cut across the communication channels, deep, rumbling, and filled with predatory amusement. War Prime Krex had decided to address the humans personally. Foolish mammals, the Vorthak commander's laughter boomed through space. You arrive in your primitive metal shells thinking to challenge the Vorthak Dominion? We have crushed 100 species who thought themselves warriors. Surrender now, and I will grant you quick deaths instead of the slow agony we reserve for our slaves. The aliens' words were meant to intimidate, to break human resolve before the battle even began. But Krex had no understanding of human psychology. Every insult, every threat, every casual mention of the suffering he had caused only fed the growing fury of the human fleet. Kate Morrison's response came back across all frequencies, her voice carrying the cold promise of retribution that had terrified humanity's enemies for generations. War Prime Krex, you made one critical mistake. You hurt children. You enslaved innocent families. You chose to prey on people who couldn't fight back. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every word carried clearly across space. Now you face humanity's wrath. And we're going to teach you why Earth is called a death world. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a deadly fireworks display. The Vorthak fleet opened with their signature plasma cannons, weapons that had melted the defenses of a dozen worlds. Brilliant green energy beams lanced across the void, striking the human ships with enough power to vaporize mountains. War Prime Krex watched from his command vessel as the human shields flared and buckled under the assault. He smiled, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. These mammals would break quickly, just like all the others. But then something impossible happened. The human ships kept coming. Lieutenant Ben Taylor gripped his command chair as his destroyer Wolfpack shuddered under direct plasma hit. The bridge lights flickered and sparks showered from damaged control panels. The ship's AI announced casualties with mechanical calm. Hull breach detected. Decks 4 through 6 venting atmosphere. 17 crew members lost. Damage report. Ben shouted over the screaming alarms. Ensign Katie Foster wiped blood from her forehead where a piece of shrapnel had cut her, but her hands never stopped working the tactical controls. Hull breach on 3 decks, sir. We've lost main power to the port weapon systems, but the starboard batteries are still online. Then we keep shooting. Ben ordered, and the Wolfpack continued its attack run, trailing atmosphere and debris but still fighting. Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out on dozens of ships. The Vorthak weapons were devastatingly effective, but the humans refused to die quietly. Ships that should have been crippled continued firing. Crews that should have been broken by casualties fought with doubled determination. Captain Mike Richards watched his weapons officer, Lieutenant Bobby Clark, work frantically at his damaged console. Half the man's face was burned from an electrical fire, but he kept targeting enemy ships with deadly precision. "Sir," Bobby called out, "I've got a firing solution on that Vorthak cruiser, but our main guns are down to 60% power." "Fire everything we have," Mike replied. "If we can't punch through their armor, we'll ram the ugly thing." The Iron Wolf launched everything in its arsenal. Kinetic rounds the size of telephone poles slammed into the Vorthak vessel's bioorganic hull. The alien ship writhed as its living armor tried to heal the damage, but the human weapons kept coming. Missiles designed for asteroid mining punched deep into the enemy's core systems. But the real terror for the Vorthak began when the human boarding pods launched. These weren't elegant transport shuttles like most civilized species used. They were armored battering rams filled with human marines who had trained for close-quarters combat on a world where everything wanted to kill them. The pods punched through Vorthak hulls like bullets through paper, embedding deep in the enemy ship's corridors. Sergeant Matt Johnson was first out of his pod aboard a Vorthak battleship. The reptilian warriors waiting for him were each twice his size, with natural armor plating and claws that could shred metal. By all reasonable expectations, the humans should have been slaughtered immediately. Instead, the Vorthak found themselves facing something they had never encountered, creatures that fought with the desperate fury of cornered animals but the tactical intelligence of apex predators. Matt's squad moved through the alien corridors like a pack of wolves. When the Vorthak tried to use their superior size and strength, the humans used speed and teamwork. When the aliens expected surrender after inflicting what should have been fatal wounds, the humans fought harder. Private Danny Walsh took a claw strike that opened his chest to the bone, but he used his falling momentum to plant an explosive charge on a critical power conduit. Corporal Lisa Martinez lost her left arm to a Vorthak energy weapon, but kept firing her rifle one-handed until her squad could reach the bridge. But it was Sergeant Johnson who became the stuff of Vorthak nightmares. The alien warriors had cut him off from his squad, surrounding him in the ship's command center. A massive Vorthak officer, thinking the small human was finally defeated, moved in for the kill. Matt's response was pure human stubbornness. Even with blood loss making him dizzy and one arm hanging useless at his side, he triggered every remaining explosive in his pack and charged straight at the enemy commander. The explosion took out half the bridge, and when the smoke cleared, both human and alien were down. But Matt Johnson had completed his mission. The Vorthak ship's command systems were destroyed, leaving it helpless for the human fleet to finish off. War Prime Krex watched in growing horror as his supposedly superior forces were torn apart by creatures that should have been easy prey. His tactical displays showed impossible things. Human ships fighting effectively with damage that would have sent any other species fleeing. Boarding parties succeeding against odds that defied belief. Warriors who became more dangerous when wounded instead of weaker. War Prime, one of his officers called out, panic clear in his voice. The human boarding parties have taken 6 of our ships. They are not falling back when injured, they are fighting harder. Krex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. A human destroyer with half its hull blown away was still firing at full power. A damaged human cruiser was ramming one of his battleships rather than retreating. These creatures didn't follow any rational pattern of warfare. They are not like other species, he whispered, finally understanding what he was facing. They do not know when to quit. Another of his ships exploded as human marines overloaded its reactor core. The explosion lit up Krex's command center with hellish light, and in that moment he made a decision that would save what remained of his fleet. All ships, full retreat, he ordered. Emergency jump to Rally Point 7. But even as the surviving vessels began their desperate escape, Krex opened one final communication channel. His message went out to every Vorthak commander in known space, a warning that would change how his species viewed the galaxy forever. Stay away from the Deathworld humans, he broadcast, his voice filled with genuine terror. They are not like us. They are not like anyone. They are monsters who refuse to die. The silence after battle was always the hardest part. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching through the viewports as the last of the Vorthak ships disappeared into hyperspace. The enemy fleet that had seemed so invincible just hours before was now nothing but debris fields and fleeing survivors. But the real victory was happening on the planet below. Captain Lucy Chen's voice came over the communication from her reconnaissance ship. Admiral, the first wave of Marine landing craft are touching down at the labor camps. The Ketare, they are free. Kate closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Around her, the bridge crew was cheering and embracing, but she felt the weight of what they had just accomplished. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a promise kept to people who had nowhere else to turn. The first reports from the surface painted a picture that would stay with the human forces forever. Sergeant Danny Walsh led a squad through the twisted metal gates of Labor Camp 7, expecting to find broken, defeated prisoners. Instead, they found thousands of Ketare looking up at them with wonder and hope that seemed impossible after months of slavery. "Are you real?" whispered a young Ketare female, her blue skin scarred from forced labor but her eyes bright with tears of joy. "Are you really here to help us?" Danny knelt down to her level, his voice gentle despite the battle-worn armor he wore. "We're real, and you're safe now. No one is ever going to hurt you again." The scene was repeated across 12 different prison camps as human marines broke down barriers and freed 50,000 Ketare from their nightmare. The aliens wept openly, reaching out to touch their rescuers as if they couldn't believe humans were real. Elderveth was found in the main processing facility, barely alive after weeks of torture designed to break his spirit and force him to reveal other Ketare colonies. When the human medics carried him to the medical ship, he kept asking if his people were truly safe. 3 days later, when Veth had recovered enough to walk, he made his way to Admiral Morrison's flagship. Kate found him waiting in the corridor outside her ready room, holding a small Ketare child that couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The youngling had been scheduled for something the Vorthak called processing, a fate too horrible for Kate to think about. "Admiral Morrison," Veth said, his voice still weak but filled with emotion. "How can we ever repay you? You came across the galaxy for people you had never met. Your soldiers died to save our children." Kate knelt down until she was at eye level with a small Ketare child, who was staring at her with wide, curious eyes. The youngling reached out a tiny blue hand and touched Kate's face, as if trying to understand what kind of being would fight monsters to save strangers. "You don't owe us anything," Kate said quietly. "But remember this day. Remember that when you called for help, Earth answered. And remember that there are people in this galaxy who will always stand between predators and the innocent. The child smiled and spoke a word in the Ketare language that the translator rendered as guardian angel. Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. On 1,000 worlds, in 100 different species' languages, the story was told and retold. The humans, the species everyone had dismissed as primitive Deathworlders, had single-handedly destroyed one of the most feared military forces in known space. But it wasn't just a military victory that shocked the galaxy. It was a fact that humans had done it for complete strangers, asking nothing in return except that the rescued species remember who their friends were. Within weeks, Earth's communication arrays were overwhelmed with incoming transmissions. Dozens of oppressed species sent desperate pleas for help. The gentle flower people of the outer rings begged for protection from slave raiders. The crystal builders of Harmony 7 asked for help against a corporate mining consortium that was destroying their ancestral homes. Each message started the same way. If the stories are true, if humans really fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. The Galactic Council, which had spent centuries treating Earth as a minor curiosity, suddenly found themselves requesting formal diplomatic meetings with what they now call the Terran Protectorate. The Council's ambassador, a nervous creature with 6 arms and eyes that kept darting around as if expecting attack, arrived at Earth's orbital station with a delegation twice the normal size. Captain Paul Wright, recently promoted to Earth's chief diplomatic officer, met the delegation in a conference room that overlooked Earth's blue marble. The alien ambassador couldn't seem to stop staring at the planet that had produced such fierce warriors. Ambassador Wright, the alien began formally. The Galactic Council wishes to establish full diplomatic relations with humanity. We may have misjudged your species' potential contribution to galactic peace. Paul's response was direct and simple. Earth protects those who cannot protect themselves. We remember our friends, and we remember our enemies. The question is simple. Which will you be? The transformation was remarkable. Within months, human patrol fleets were cruising through former Vorthak territory and beyond. The ships themselves became symbols of hope for peaceful species and warning for would-be conquerors. Pirates who had operated freely for decades suddenly found themselves facing human captains who took a very personal interest in protecting civilian shipping. Elder Veth, now fully recovered, established a communication network that broadcast across 17 sectors. His message was simple but powerful. The humans came when no one else would. They bled for strangers. They asked for nothing except that we remember friendship. They are the guardians we never knew we needed. New rescue beacons began appearing throughout space, their signals carrying a message that would become legendary. If you need help, call Earth. The Deathworlders are listening. On distant worlds, parents told their children bedtime stories about the fierce but kind humans who cross the galaxy to protect the innocent. In the darkest corners of space, where predators had once hunted freely, they now whispered warnings about the species that turned hunting into a very dangerous game. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in her ready room, looking out at Earth through the viewport. The planet that had produced humanity looked so peaceful from space, giving no hint of the warriors it had forged through millions of years of survival. But now the galaxy knew the truth. Earth was more than a death world. It was the home of the galaxy's newest and most determined guardians. Asterisk the END asterisk.